Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our series on the Charter of Triunnia, Genesis Codex. This video is about trespass. It sets up recognition for what trespass is at a much higher standard than presently exists. Trespass is a simple concept on its surface, but its implications go far and wide, with consequences ranging from moral injuries to extreme trauma and death. This video showcases a first look at how we understand trespass in Triunia, so let's get into it. Now we move on to trespass. This is where the rubber meets the road, basically, where our understanding of the law of thought begins to really matter in day-to-day interactions. This will probably be a little confusing, as I guess most of this is. It'll make more sense if you understand the law of thought better. So you'd have to read Thinking and Destiny, probably in order to fully understand what I'm trying to say. But let's go through it and see if we can make it work, or at least give you an idea. So 157, trespass. 1571, definition of trespass. Any thought, construct, or exteriorization issued by ascending triune self that, by virtue of 142 ownership of self, interferes with the proper operation of the receiving triune self, or by virtue of 1432b, joint ownership of a thought with a triune self, interferes with the proper operation of any of the receiving triune self's thoughts, constructs, and or exteriorizations. That's a lot, but that is our definition of trespass in Triunia. That is super advanced, right? So thought, we've discussed thoughts. Construct is an arrangement of thoughts, so multiple thoughts together in a certain arrangement, and the exteriorization. So the thought is the mental part, and the exteriorization is the physical part. The language around ascending and receiving triune self is used to distinguish between two possible participating triune selves in this dynamic. One of them hurts another, interferes with the proper operation, and the method of interference can either be physical, psychic, mental, or noetic. Either way, if it causes an interference of their operation, that's trespass against them. And then the other one, if it interferes with the proper operation of a thought, construct, or exteriorization that they own. Remember, there's a kind of ownership that is recognized between a triune self and their thoughts. And thoughts can be legal entities such as businesses. So to say that you own a business in Triunian speak is to say that you own the thought of the business, or you own the thought that exteriorizes as your business. And therefore, interfering with its operation is a trespass. And that's true anyway in general understanding of the world, but now we've got the operation of the law of thought applied to it. So our resolution of what a trespass is and how it works is clearer and higher than what currently exists. And so that's a thought, and a construct is an arrangement of thoughts. And that might be somebody who's got like a bunch of legal entities structured together in a certain way that they own. There's an operation there, and that too can be trespassed upon. Trespass is ultimately the same thing, but we have a higher resolution to it, and therefore the impacts of that resolution go far and wide, which we will see as we get through it. So let's proceed. Sameness. It is possible for the sender and receiver to be the same triune self. You can trespass against yourself. Why? One is you might be ignorant, and therefore confused or insane, and you don't know what you're doing. So, okay, you hurt yourself, and that would be betraying self-respect. So actions you take to prevent yourself from harming yourself. But also, often it's going to be you hurt your body, and the body's in your custody. You're not supposed to hurt it. Therefore, you can trespass against your body as well. You can trespass against your being, your triune self, your system, and its operation, and you can trespass against your body. Damage. As the proper operation is defined as health, trespasses can be a source of damage. Remember, we look at it from a systems perspective, and our definition of health is defined as the proper operation of a system. The body is a system, it works a certain way. The triune self is a system that works a certain way. And when it's prevented or altered in such a way that it's no longer working according to its proper operation, that is damage. And the damage will result in what's called an injury or a disease or a disorder or something. But the damage is ultimately our tracking of the operation of the system, which is an information construct. It's a mental thing, but it exteriorizes physically as injury, psychic disorder, mental disorder, whatever it's called. And so a trespass can cause damage, which is a problem. Okay, so a warning on trespasses. Trespasses against this property relation can steal the destiny a Triune Self needs to learn and grow, which can damage it. Alternatively, unwanted or undesired destinies can possibly be prevented by such interventions. And as much as we can make rules and stuff, every rule has its exception, and the operational law of thought also has its exceptions. So purity, it can't always appeal to purity. We're like, don't trespass, but then maybe you do need to trespass to prevent something from happening. That's possible and it's legit. And the reason is, in this reality, we can study the laws in isolation, but what actually happens is everything gets combined with everything else and it becomes way too complicated to sort through it all. So you generally try to do the best that you can. And the hope with adding this knowledge into the framework of a country is that our best becomes better than what is currently possible right now. Trespasses against the property relation can steal the destiny a Triune Self needs to learn and grow. This is important because this is talking about adaptation. You need to think in order to grow, and so you need experiences that you can respond to in order to grow. And if that's not allowed, if there's certain experiences that you need that you are prevented from having, you will not be able to grow in that area. And that might be necessary for you to grow. And so what happens long term is that because it's necessary for you to grow and it's a blocked off blind spot, let's call it the shadow of the society, what will happen is the universe will configure itself in such a way that that shadow starts presenting itself in the society so that the people can learn what is currently being prevented from them learning. For example, lessons around self-defense. There's a whole lot of lessons around self-defense that are just not allowed to be learned by the general population. And so what will happen is it goes in the shadow of the society, and then one day, a lot of people are going to need to learn how to defend themselves. I mean, I guess that's your origin of tyranny at that point. So you got to be careful about making absolute laws like that because just as an individual can have a shadow, they can bury and they can suppress things, their thoughts of whatever, the same can be with a society. And what happens is, and that suppression can lead to undesired consequences for the society. So we got to be very careful about how we set the direction of the society in order to avoid things like that. Other examples of this is I think, sexual repression in the Victorian era, which resulted in a sexual liberation at some point later. And then currently now there's also suppression of hate. And there's a warning that that might actually come out and be a thing. Liberation of hate, I don't want to say that, but that could be a way to explain it, and so forth. So you got to be very careful about things like that. Okay, 1572. Trespasses upon exteriorizations. One exteriorization can interfere with another exteriorization. This is called a trespass. A thought can exteriorize as an object, action, or event, and so one object or action can interfere with another object or action, and that too can be a trespass. And we're now going to recognize the different aspects of that. 1572A, the owner trespasses. The owner of the trespassing exteriorization is trespassing and is called a trespasser. A trespasser can be a triune self, human being, human body, construct, or thought. And then another clue to remember about the singular aims. Thoughts have a singular aim and may occasionally combine with other thoughts during exteriorizations. If such encounters are undesired, such thoughts may need to be guided or regulated so as not to trespass. Let's use the example of advertisements in a video. You are engaged in watching an interesting video or interacting with a stream that you like. That is an interaction between you and the thought of the video as exteriorized by its creator. Suddenly, there is an interruption to your experience by some random third party in the form of an advertisement. That advertisement had no business being there, interrupting you and your experience and getting in your way. The thought of the advertisement trespassed upon the thought of the video exteriorizing to you as an object and your action of watching it. It impacts the proper operation of the viewing experience. What's even worse is that the interruption is given higher priority than the content. Unless it is a genuine emergency, there is no valid reason for an interruption through the viewing medium to intrude upon your viewing experience. The same is true of advertisements in cities, usually on billboards. They interrupt the beauty of the city architecture, and that's also a trespass because it steals and damages the beauty of the environment. Beauty is a lot more important than people give it credit for because it grants a passive inspirational and uplifting effect, which is necessary for mental health and creativity. The thought of the advertisement trespasses upon the thought of the city, and so it can't deliver its beauty as effectively, and this has negative impacts on the well being of the people. Frequent advertisements everywhere are symptomatic of a society that has no proper conception of what a trespass truly is or how far such impacts reach. If it's unwelcome and there's no consent for it, it's pretty much a trespass. 1572b. Property relations are exteriorizations. The recognized property relations in 152 property of self and 153 property of thought are exteriorizations of their respective triune self, and it is possible for them to be trespassed upon. I don't think I need to say anything more about that. We're just recognizing, okay, property relations is a form of exteriorization, and we can trespass upon it. It's possible to, we shouldn't, but it's possible to. So that if you are trespassed upon, that's an opportunity for you to learn to defend yourself, for example, to prevent it. And in so doing, you teach the trespasser why they shouldn't be doing that. And then you both learn and grow, each in your own way, as a result of that. That event is the balancing factor of, I guess, two thoughts coming together. 1572c, host thoughts do not trespass. So this is back in the country and the city thing. Per 1541c, host thoughts provide realm and laws. When a host thought exteriorizes a reality with immutable universal laws, those laws are not a trespass, and their ruling thought or triune self is not trespassing so long as they maintain non interference. And the key to this one is immutable universal laws. Immutable universal laws are a part of how a reality works and cannot be changed from within the reality. If there are ever laws where this immutability is not guaranteed, then this rule does not apply and the host is vulnerable to trespassing. So we say a reality that is manufactured or that happens to exist, like this reality, it exists for people to come in and have an experience. Whoever's hosting that reality is responsible for the operation of the reality and everyone inside it. They must maintain non-interference in order not to trespass, because any kind of interference in a reality that is being hosted is like a free will violation, and that is psychologically traumatic to the spirit, to the individual. And so that's why things like non-interference is a thing, and it's why there will never ever be a free will violation from the universe. It doesn't happen, it can't happen, it's not how it works. It's absolutely not allowed. And frankly, the hosts of this universe know better than to indulge in those kinds of stupid fantasies. If we actually manage to construct a reality, even a little simulation or test reality or something like that, a small one, we have to make very sure the laws in that reality are immutable. They cannot be changed to favor anyone or another or for anything. The rules are set and they stay that way. They're immutable for the entire duration of that reality. Because if that is not guaranteed, then the possibility of trespassing opens up, and the host, the creator of that reality is now vulnerable to trespassing. 1572d, sibling thoughts can trespass. Per 1541d, sibling thoughts are independent of each other when a thought's exteriorization interferes with another thought's exteriorization, and this occurs at the same hierarchy level, This is a trespass, and the owner of the trespassing thought is a trespasser. Okay, so this is where the meat of our trespassing law is. Some people recognize taxes as theft, but they can't explain why. Here, we explain why. And so let's give you some examples. Impact. To demonstrate the impact of this understanding of trespass, consider the following scenarios. A thief steals some jewelry, which is event A, or technically action A. The thief is arrested, action B. The thief is sent to jail, C. A, B, and C are each independent exteriorizations. None of them are respectful, moral, nor honorable behavior. In A, the thief trespasses against the owner of the jewelry by stealing the jewelry. They stole the objects that are owned by the owner there. In B, the police trespass against the thief because they stole him from his life, and they can't arrest without violence. Therefore, it's dishonorable. And then C, the thief is sent to jail. The state or court or police trespass against the thief by locking him up and putting him in the prize zone, prison, prize zone. I got that one from a mentor of mine who recognized prisons as prize zones, as holding areas for people who engage in dishonorable conduct. And it's a barbaric practice anyway. Like who does that? Now the alternative, of course, is if you don't lock them up, then they're free to roam the world and commit violence and dishonor upon everyone. But this goes back into not having any conception of self-defense or not allowing it. And so you're preventing natural selection from taking them out or teaching them the proper way to behave. The goal was to maintain the peace, but exceptions to the natural order are not a justified way of maintaining peace. They don't scale. How peace was actually achieved is through violence, immorality, and dishonor, through trespass. Any system that relies on such behavior for its functionality will always become tyrannical and never last for very long. And so, yeah, it might get a little chaos, but at that time, when these systems were built, did not have knowledge of the law of thought or much knowledge at all. Now it's a different world. Now we have great knowledge of what makes something abstract. We still have a generally insane population, though, so not everybody can be in a position where they can own their actions completely, but we can get there as a stepping stone. And at least this codex shows the way to do it. You get the government you deserve, you get the society you deserve. And if these are conditions of your society where the state must trespass against you and must do violence against you in order to operate, what does that say about your condition or the condition of the people that you're in? And this prevents the actively good from developing and allows the actively wicked to develop. And herein lies the source of the imbalance in the world system. It's also a fundamentally dishonorable practice, and we have better ways of dealing with it at Triunia, but we'll get there. The Triune Self performs work for someone and collects their part of the trade. A. The country's tax authority takes a percentage of the trade. This is event B. It performs work for someone and collects their part of the trade. Okay, so this is an action, and then the country's tax authority takes percentage of the trade. That's an event. A and B are independent exteriorizations. Although B is part of the host reality, the country, its laws are not immutable universal laws because they had to be consistent across the entire reality and not change ever for the duration of that reality. The host country is vulnerable to trespassing. Okay, so let's look at this a bit closer. In A, performs work, so you make a trade with somebody, you do work, and you collect a payment. The triune self respectful, moral, and honorable. This is a transaction that is jointly owned between the triune self and whoever they're doing work with. They own it, it's theirs, and it exteriorizes as the event ultimately is the trade. Then his other thought comes along from the country and is like, hey, I like a piece of that action. The tax authority is trespassing because there is no explicit agreement waiving the interference. This other thought is exteriorizing an event that is interfering with the operation of the first thought. of the first transaction. It's a mental trespass, which is generally unrecognized, but intuitively some people are getting it, and that's why they say tax is theft. It's ultimately like a mafia payment and irresponsible. Acting respectfully, morally, and honorably at all times allows a trespasser to be dealt with at the moment of their exteriorization where they are best positioned to learn. It is the responsibility of the trespassee, the one being trespassed upon, to teach this lesson however they see fit and in accordance with their ability, which is their exteriorization. An easy way to understand that is the self defense lesson. However, they do it according to their ability, which means somebody strong may use only what force is absolutely necessary to stop the trespass. Somebody weak may opt for greater force because they just can't win a simple fight. The learning in that moment is their exteriorization for how to do self defense. It's what they need in order to learn, and is provided by the trespasser. And it's their responsibility. And remember, freedom and responsibility are linked at that moment. And so it's always at the moment of exteriorization where the biggest lessons are learned, where all the lessons are learned, really. That's just one way to do it. Other ways include diplomacy or talking about it, talking it through, and there's a whole skill sets around there. Diplomacy, I just said, but also negotiation, charisma, persuasion, things of that nature. But then also not getting together as a coalition and treating each other with violence. You just have to know better how to build a better society. And so there's a present standard way of things that work on this planet. Don't agree with it. I think we can do better. And I'm building a society that allows us to do better. And so we aren't going to engage in tax trespassing. No way. There are better ways of running a society than stealing from every single event that anybody has in their life as it relates to wealth. Remember the desire hierarchy. The state should have separation of concerns over all of those things and yet still function in reality. So we're going to build a much more respectful state, much more honorable state. And so explicit consent is required. Explicit consent is required whenever one exteriorization would interfere with another exteriorization. And so if they want to do a tax, get the explicit consent. It's a welcome and it makes it conscious. Conscious welcome ensures the would-be interference is consciously welcomed and thus non-interference. So if I set up an event that I authorize occurs whenever I make a transaction, okay. If I've authorized it, it's fine. I jointly own that thought, and therefore I participate in its exteriorization. And that is an authoring power, let's say. And therefore I maintain freedom and responsibility for myself. That's the way to do it. Whereas currently, the state enforces its rule and you have no say. They put the onus on you to obey that rule, but that's not conscious and it's not with consent. Tacit consent, we don't recognize that because you can just change your mind and then the consent is removed. It's a very, very weak policy. It's presumptive and brittle. And so imposing your will upon another is dishonorable. Presumption is dangerous. Without explicit consent, all a Trian self has to do is change their mind or disagree to revoke presumed consent, and the next exteriorization becomes a trespass. Done. Compliance is not consent. Tacit consent is presumptive and not conscious consent. So recently, for example, I had to go do jury duty. I went and did it, picking your battles and stuff, but that language, completely disrespectful, authoritarian. It was under implied threat. I was there under duress. The entire experience was disrespectful, immoral, dishonorable, yet it is the only way they could operate their system. If that's the only way you can operate your system sucks. So they thought they had consent. They never did. It was a presumption of duty, but actually, as a head of state, they were technically in violation of international law, and they could have gone to jail. If I wanted to throw them in jail, I could have raised the issue. I chose not to. as I said, is not worth it. And this project being under construction, still, like, it'd have to get immunity recognition properly in order to do it. But that's the issue. You don't know who you're dealing with when you do things like that. I note that if they wanted my help, they could have asked nicely. That would have been the respectful, moral, and honorable way to do things. Instead, they chose violence and created a moral injury as a result. They trespassed, and their whole system operates on trespass. It doesn't scale. There will never be lasting peace when things are done that way. The universe does not care about peace. It cares about morality and honor and respect. Peace is the eventual result of that behavior that scales. Peace cannot be achieved through forceful means. And so 1572F, edicts without consent are a trespass, and this specifically attacks state rule. The exteriorization of an edict without first obtaining explicit consent of all affected shall be a trespass. And so Triunia will issue no edicts. It doesn't do that. If we ever do legislation in Triunia, how it would work is we would go and get consent for each member that the legislation will affect. And if we don't have that, it won't apply to them. So rather than one rule for everybody, it's pick and choose what rules you want to follow. And we will have the infrastructure to be able to manage that. And then we grandfather in the rules so that the next generation gets born into them under the law of nations. They inherit the condition of their parents. Now, our definition of terrorism, or the definition of terrorism, when trespasses by the state are backed by violence, or when any trespass is backed by violence, it is terrorism. So that call for jury duty under threat of jail or fine or violence if I don't do it, that's state terrorism by definition. And that's how their system works. And they can make any excuses they want. I can tell them straight up that, oh, it's dishonorable here, disrespectful there, immoral there, going to cause damage to people's systems here and there. That's how powerful this codex is. It shines a light, just a big, bright, magnifying light on every single dishonorable function in a state. And in any state that isn't operating with the law properly, with the universal laws of free will and the law of thought, they're obsolete. They're going to fall away. They're going to run out of energy, and the universe is going to dismantle them because they don't know what they're doing, and they're trespassing upon each other constantly. And that there's also corruption everywhere, and that the universe will answer. All we have to do is get out of its way, starve the beast, build something better, and you change the world. 1573, trespasses upon beings. Okay, now we get into some really deep subject matter. If you already thought we were in some deep subject matter, we're going deeper. Betrayal of the triune self human being relation is a trespass. By virtue of 1522A, the triune self has custody over its human being. The human being is a separate being from the triune self and is in its custody. The triune self has a duty to care for it. When the triune self breaches that duty, it has trespassed against the human being in its custody. Remember that the human being is a life in its own right, an animal with a certain amount of consciousness. You, as an intelligent incorporeal entity, have more consciousness and you're paired with it during incarnation for your life. You are responsible for that being. It's an error to think of it as you. You're responsible for it nevertheless. And you're there to help it grow. It helps you grow, you help it grow. And both of you experience nature. Self-respect protects against trespass in this relation. So you use self-respect so that you never allow trespasses against your human being and against yourself. Now, all self-harms are trespasses because of the way this relation works. And this includes suicide, which is actually the murder of another being, the human being in the custody of the triune self. Suicide is more properly termed self-murder, and Percival agrees. In fact, that's his words. He said that. Other examples of self-harm include, but are not limited to, consuming foods, drinks, and other substances the body is not designed to digest, like refined sugar, for example. Regular sugar in fruits and stuff appears to be fine, maple syrup, honey, but the refined stuff appears to be problematic if it's sugar by itself, not paired with a nutrient molecule. Breathing air and other gases that interfere with the body's breath mechanism. So, pollution, for example. Injecting foreign substances into the body, that would be drugs. Any self inflicted physical, psychological, mental, or noetic injury. Lying to yourself on the noetic side, engaging in perdition, or setting up habits that injure your thinking ability is a mental injury. Psychological injury, of course, you can do that if you're not careful. And any self inflicted physical wound. Self harms are trespasses. The state sanctioned suicide programs made, those facilitate trespasses against another. And it's very damaging because what happens is you separate the body from the triune self. The body dies, the triune self still has its existence. There's a certain coil in its psychic atmosphere that still has to work through, and that has not been addressed. And so the triune self will stay there in the psychic atmosphere around Earth, around their place for the duration. But because they're separated from their body, they cannot think. They have no brain. Thinking requires the brain in order to do it because it brings in the focus faculty and it brings in all other faculties to operate the thinking function. And so without this, what happens is the triune self in the psychic atmosphere ends up getting very traumatized. And it has no ability to think and understand and reason its way through what's happening. It's just going to act on what it already knows and habits it's already built to date. And souls can be very naive things. So a triune self that has suicided itself or self-murdered itself, it's going to experience, first for the rest of its original life, it's going to experience extreme trauma. And then it's going to carry that trauma into its next incarnation so it can be resolved. But because it committed the karmic action of murder, murder of the self in this case, murder of the body that was in its custody, well, that karmic action is going to invoke a balancing factor of the thought of murder, which means it will get itself murdered at some point in the future, in that future life, because it went and murdered itself first. So a suicide is effectively like experiencing a double murdered death, and it's extremely traumatic for the rest of that life and the life that follows. And the state sanctioned MAID programs, they are effectively creating a population of triune cells who are traumatic in their territory, and then the next generation of people who incarnate into it, and so forth and so forth. And over time, that will create a very traumatized population and a very significant ghost problem as well. We don't do MAID. We don't disrespect life at all like that. It's extremely damaging and just not the right way. Relieving suffering is not a reason for doing it, and it's not even a reason for anything. If you're suffering, it's because you've poisoned yourself to the point of suffering, one, and then two, aren't doing what's necessary to resolve it. And three, if you're at the end of your life anyway, your duty is to prepare for death. And when you suicide yourself, you don't even give yourself that ability. It's just careless. The entire thing is immoral and dishonorable and disrespectful. And when I say those words, I do mean there's weight behind those words and systemic functions that have been studied and analyzed and proven. And I can prove everything I just said in a court if I had to. Everyone who goes into MAID, they've got a murder charge effectively on them, which they're going to experience in their next life as a victim of murder. And then everyone who pushed the button on the MAID machine, accomplice to murder. If it was Triunian, that's how it is. That's what we recognize. There's no immunity for that here. It looks more to me like those MAID programs are extermination programs. And because the state is compromised by wealth desires over the best care for their people, of course, they're going to choose decisions that optimize for efficiency rather than quality, and therefore commandeer the direction of the society into a direction that's not healthy for it. So there you go. You never let a business cartel, in this case, the health cartel, whatever that means, have its say over the population, because then you get misguided situations like this. Let's move on. Enough ranting. 1573b. Producing exteriorizations that directly harm others are trespasses. Right? That makes sense, right? When a triune self or human being produces an exteriorization and that exteriorization injures another triune self and or its human being, and that exteriorization has not changed ownership. So if I make a thing, if I make an object, if I make a knife, and I go and stab another human being with that knife, that's a trespass. Well, it's also assault and potentially murder, but it's firstly a trespass, and then everything else is flavor. Then this trespass is a trespass, and the producer is a trespasser. And so morality and honor protect against trespassing upon others. Morality are actions you take to prevent yourself from harming others and others from harming you. Morality has a self-defense component to it. It's not moral to be a pacifist, and it's not moral to roll over and let somebody take advantage of you. It's not even honorable either. And honor, of course, is don't steal from others. Don't steal their life. Don't steal dignity. Don't steal their ability to defend themselves. Toxic food and gases. Okay, so environmental concerns here. If, for example, a restaurant produces meals using ingredients the human body is not designed to digest and serves them, then this is injurious and a trespass. If, for example, a triune self or human being smokes or vapes, and there are nearby human beings who breathe that in, then these gases interfere with the body's breathing mechanism, and this is injurious and a trespass. I actually consider it assault. I should be able to defend myself from being assaulted by poisonous gases, for example, but society chooses to turn a blind eye to this for however long. But it's actually very serious. And restaurants need to step up their game. They don't know that they're actually serving toxic food to people. And thus, in the West, we have like our meals produce heart attacks, and it's because of what we eat. Can a restaurant produce meals that do not injure their people, their customers, for example? That's a much higher standard that currently exists, but it is recognized in this codex as a trespass if that's what you do. And so the standard for food quality in restaurants goes higher. The standard for air quality in the environment becomes higher. And what are we doing here? If, for example, a business produces polluting gases and there are nearby human beings who breathe them in, then these gases interfere with the body's breathing mechanism, and this is injurious and a trespass. Another example, only instead of smoking and vaping, it's smokestacks from a business. Maybe there's a better way to not pollute the environment that way. I hear carbon capture is a way to do it. That's one way, but there could be others, for example. And then additional examples of trespass in the atmospheres. Psychological, mental, and noetic trespasses. If, for example, a therapist uses hypnosis or other means to interfere with the proper operation of the triune self, reprogram it, fracture its personality, or install other personalities, then this is a trespass. And I have researched a bunch of these kinds of situations before coming up with the idea for Triunnia, so they are definitely possible. And certainly, hypnosis is the act of programming another being, and there's all kinds of things that can come out of that. It's very dangerous to allow someone else to program you. And what people don't often realize is that beings are programmable. We are programmable beings. That's why the opening line in the Genesis Codex is about recognizing the programmatic nature of reality and showing great respect for it and the roles we have in programming that reality. So we're very big on respect. If, for example, a state official or media company produces propaganda that coerces its audience in such a way as to interfere with the proper operation of their triune self, then this is a trespass. Propaganda or cognitive warfare to steer your thinking politically for the advantage of the state, for example, that's trespass. But that's how politics works today. And the same can be done for advertisements and so forth. It's a much higher standard and it's a much higher resolution of how things work. And so a lot of behaviors that currently exist today are actually unethical. A truly free and democratic society that works to the benefit of everyone, it's very different from what works today. And you guys don't know what a properly functioning society looks like. All you have is this, where your entire life is spent working for somebody else, toiling away as a slave. You think you're free. You have no idea. You're not free at all. They did not abolish slavery, they perfected it, and it's called employment now. Voluntary servitude is still servitude, it's slavery. Now, can we engineer a society where you don't have to toil away for somebody else, sell your labor just to survive on your own home planet? We strive to solve that here with Triunia, but we have to recognize the issues first, because that gives us a foundation, all the knowledge of what not to do. Now, the challenge is what to do given those constraints. So, this is going to set you up for future success. And finally, if, for example, a set of lies or a synthetic device controls the mind of a Triune self, then this is a trespass and the controller is a trespasser. Mind control. However it's done, whether by lies or device or any other means, for controlling somebody's mind is a trespass. Being aware of how not to trespass allows you to navigate the ocean of freedom safely and maintain your freedom. Those who trespass consistently eventually lose their freedom as everyone else arrives at the conclusion that the trespassers don't know what they are doing and must be controlled to prevent them from causing chaos and damage. This is where the phrase, "you get the government you deserve," comes from. So it's important to be aware of how trespass works so that you don't do it, because that knowledge is fundamental to maintaining freedom. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you found it interesting and inspiring. There is a solution to tyranny. This is it. Your best thinking brought you here. The system's purpose is what it does. It's time for better thinking and a better system. In this video, we took a deep dive into how trespass is understood in Triunia. We saw that this simple concept about not trespassing against another has far-reaching implications with consequences ranging from moral injuries to extreme trauma and death. Also, it's not just a physical thing, it's psychological, mental, and noetic. In Triunia, we want leadership without harm. Culturally, the people can also adopt peace without harm by truly understanding how to avoid trespasses. It's just self-respect, morality, and honor, always. It's just that and scale. The next video in this series goes into classes that exist based on our thinking and how those inform the kinds of governments people build, and further how those societies are built on collusion and what law actually is. It should be posted in a week or two, but subscribe to be notified because there is no regular posting schedule. See you in the next one.